In the early 2000s, this blue and silver handset began appearing in pockets across the subcontinent. It linked remote villages to major cities for pennies, effectively ending centuries of geographic isolation for millions of people in a single decade. To understand why this digital arrival felt so revolutionary, we have to look at the network that was dismantled, long before the first cell tower was ever built. Thousands of years ago, the Indus Valley Civilization operated as a highly advanced integrated network. They utilized standardized weights and measures and precise urban grids that spanned multiple massive cities, connected by trade and shared mathematics. Later, institutions like Nalanda University acted as the world's primary knowledge hubs. Nalanda hosted up to 10,000 students at a time, bringing together scholars from across Asia to study medicine, astronomy, and philosophy, entirely free of charge. India's historical default was not a collection of isolated kingdoms, but a deeply integrated architecture of knowledge and coexistence. This intellectual unity naturally bled into the cultural fabric. Mughal courts were known to openly celebrate Hindu festivals like Holi and Diwali, integrating them into royal tradition. Sufi poets wrote verses honoring Hindu deities, and the Mahabharata was meticulously translated into Persian. These weren't isolated gestures, they were the day-to-day operations of an intertwined society. Before any external empire arrived to draw lines on a map, this subcontinent functioned as a single, massive social network. When British colonial rule faced the 1857 revolt, they saw Hindu and Muslim soldiers fighting as a single unit. They recognized this embedded unity as a direct threat to the stability of their empire. The response was a policy of divide and rule. Colonial schools began utilizing history textbooks that framed ancient Hindu and Muslim rulers as permanent, bloodthirsty enemies, systematically planting the seeds of mutual fear. This cultivated paranoia eventually gave rise to the two-nation theory, a psychological wedge pushed into the population by a ruling class that benefited from their division. In 1909, the Morley-Minto reforms turned this psychology into law. They created separate electorates based on religion, where citizens could only legally vote for candidates of their own faith. This forced political candidates to stop appealing to the whole society and instead pander to the extreme ends of their own demographic to win power. The British didn't just conquer India territorially. They used legislative and psychological tools to dismantle its ancient architecture of connection. In 1947, this decades-long psychological fracture reached a violent physical climax. The partition displaced over 10 million people and left 1 million dead, shattering the networks of commerce and kinship that had existed for centuries. The scars of that severing remained visible well into the new millennium, manifesting as permanent military standoffs and dirt trenches along the line of control. Even in 2001, the region was still reeling from the symptoms of that fracture, most notably during the violent terrorist attack on the Indian Parliament in New Delhi. By the dawn of the 21st century, India was a fractured giant, defined largely by its borders and the trauma of its separation. In 2001, the population of India officially crossed 1 billion. The nation had become a demographic giant, yet it was still straining against the physical and economic boundaries defined 50 years earlier. But a new layer of infrastructure was quietly being woven over the noise. Mobile signals and fiber optics began to create a second, invisible geography that could move faster than the physical bureaucracy. The national rollout of ATMs allowed 1 billion people to manage their own capital instantly, bypassing the gatekeepers of the old, isolated economy. Digital platforms soon provided a borderless voice. They allowed youth to connect across class and cultural divides, creating a shared space for ideas that ignored national boundaries entirely. This new era of digital innovation provided the foundation for massive scientific achievements, like the successful 2001 test launch of the GSLV-D1 space rocket. The tech boom wasn't just about consumer convenience. It was the active, digital reassembly of a network that had been suppressed for a century. While screens have brought new challenges of personal isolation, they also provided a way to circumvent the physical borders of 1947. Ideas, commerce, and culture could now move across the subcontinent without ever touching the soil of a military trench. This borderless exchange is a modern reflection of the ancient state, a return to a time when Nalanda's knowledge and the Indus Valley's integration were the primary forces of the region. Technology hasn't undone the borders of the past, but it has made them increasingly irrelevant to the flow of the future. India is reclaiming its original architecture, a network defined not by its lines of division, but by the strength of its connections.